You ever open up an ancient text and feel like you're trying to read a message from another planet? I mean, these stories are so important to our culture, but they come from a world that is just completely different from ours. So, how in the world do we bridge that gap? How do we understand these stories on their own terms? Well, we're going to figure that out. Here's the core problem, right? We are separated from these stories by thousands of years. We're talking different languages, different cultures, a completely different way of seeing the world. And if we just read them at face value, we could totally miss the point. Or even worse, we could twist them into something they were never ever meant to be. So, to get our hands dirty, we're going to use a single case study. It's a fantastic story from Genesis 24 about an arranged marriage and, yeah, 10 camels. It's a perfect story to let us test drive a few different ways of reading these kinds of texts. Okay, so let's think of this whole thing as a puzzle. We've got these ancient stories, but how do we unlock what they're trying to say to us today? Over the centuries, people have come up with some very different solutions to that puzzle. The first method we're going to look at is an older one, and it is super creative. It basically treats the story not as history, but as a kind of secret code full of hidden symbols. This is what's called the allegorical method. So the main idea here is that the historical details, the people, the places, the objects in the story, they aren't really what's important. Nope, they're just symbols for much deeper spiritual truths. Your job, as the reader, is basically to be a detective and decipher that code. So, how does this actually work with our story? Well, it gets pretty wild. Isaac, he becomes a symbol for Christ. His bride, Rebecca, well, she represents the church. The servant who goes to find her, he's the preacher. And the 10 camels, you guessed it, they symbolize the 10 commandments. I mean, it gets really creative. Even the earrings are interpreted as a symbol for patience. Okay, but you can probably see the problem here, right? This approach isn't really getting meaning out of the text, it's just putting meaning into it. As the source material says, it's not exegesis, which means explaining what's there, it's eisegesis, which is just a fancy term for reading your own ideas into the story. You can basically make it mean anything you want. All right, so if the allegorical method is kind of a free-for-all, what's a more common approach? Well, a lot of people just focus on the characters themselves to find moral lessons. This is called the exemplaristic approach, and I bet you've used it 1,000 times. It's the classic, what's the moral of the story method? You look at what the characters do, and you treat their actions as examples, either good ones to follow or bad ones to avoid. Be like them or don't be like them. Simple. Now, if we apply this to our Genesis story, we get some really practical takeaways. Abraham's concern for Isaac's wife, that teaches parents to care about who their kids marry. Check. The servant's prayer, that's a model for our own life. And Rebecca's generosity in watering all those camels. Be like her. Serve others joyfully. It's all very relatable. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? This method has its own set of problems. For one, it can be pretty random. For example, the servant asks for this super specific sign to find the right woman. So should we do that today when we're looking for a partner? Some people would say yes. Others would say that's crazy. The method itself doesn't give us a clear way to decide. And that points to a much deeper problem. This whole approach can become anthrocentric, which is just a big word for human-centered. It becomes all about us. When we're so focused on the do's and don'ts for our lives, we can totally miss who the story is actually about, which, in these stories, is usually God. And that leads us right into a third way of reading these stories. This one flips the script. It shifts our focus away from the human characters and onto the divine author and the huge story that's being told. This is the redemptive historical approach, and it asks one big question. How does this one specific story fit into the Bible's single, massive, overarching story of redemption? See, instead of a bunch of fables with morals, every single event becomes a critical puzzle piece in a much, much larger picture. So when we look at our test story through this lens, the focus changes completely. The main character isn't Abraham or Rebecca. It's God. He's the one actively pulling the strings, fulfilling his promise to build a nation. This marriage isn't just a sweet romance. It's a critical make-or-break moment in the chain of events that, the text says, leads all the way to Christ. So let's just put these two side by side, because this is the crucial difference. The character-focused approach asks, what should I do? But the author-focused approach asks, what is God doing? One centers on my actions, my life. The other centers on God's grand plan. It's a huge shift in perspective. So, does this mean we have to choose? Do we pick between finding moral examples and seeing the big picture? No, not at all. Actually, the best, most robust way to read these stories is to put the pieces together. Here's the key. These two approaches aren't enemies, they're meant to work together. You use the big picture redemptive historical context, the what is God doing part, as your foundation. That framework then gives you the guardrails you need to identify which moral lessons are actually timeless principles and which ones are, well, maybe just products of their time. So here's a simple 3-step guide to make this practical. 1. Only start with the big picture. Ask, what is God doing in his grand plan here? 2. Then you can find the human example. Okay, so what can we learn from the people in this story? And 3, connect them. See the beautiful way God's sovereign plan is worked out through the messy, faithful, and very real choices of actual human beings. And here is why this matters so much. These stories aren't just fables that were made up to illustrate a nice point. For the biblical authors, the history itself is the point. Doctrine, what is believed, grows right out of what actually happened. The events are the foundation for everything else. So the next time you open up an ancient story, don't just ask what's happening. Ask why it's there. Why was this story included in the first place? Because when you understand a story's ultimate purpose, its why, I promise you, it changes how you see every single detail.